Welcome back to the Dopesick Show you won't get sick of. I'm Spencer and this is my sidekick Sasha. I spent most of my 20s in federal prison, but I've been off heroin since April 9, 2010. Got a lot of stories about the dumb stuff I did to get put in prison. I've also got a lot of stories about the crazy stuff that actually happened when I was in prison. And God forbid you end up in prison. You won't have to make some of the same mistakes I made. So, before starting this, don't condone any of, this type of thing, nothing like that. But I'm telling a story here, okay? So, in prison, it's raining outside. Sorry for that noise. It's not anything on my part, but it's nothing I can help. That just started. It don't sound like it's going away, so we're going to have to roll with it. But anyhow, drugs in prison. People find outlets, okay? Some people gamble. Some people, go chasing relationships or, that type of an outlet. Okay, some people collect pictures, like pictures you have of your family, but they're like adult stars and stuff, and some of them don't quite look like, they got like braces, underdeveloped, some wild stuff. And then some people do drugs, as part of it. Besides, the illegal drugs that are snuck into prison, the biggest market that's a daily thing that happens every single day are medications that come from pill line. Now, there's a number of things people abuse. I was on 2 medications prior to going into prison for 2 years that I took every day that I never abused at all. I didn't know that people abused them. I'd never heard of it before, but then I go to prison and find out, yeah, they do. So those 2 medications, which were the 2 primary ones, were Neurontin, which is also known as gabapentin, and the other one's Wellbutrin. One was kind of like a downer, one's an upper. And Wellbutrin, I ended up quitting taking that. I got certain issues and stuff. It didn't do well with me. But some people abuse that, and it gives them like a speed effect. So how this worked, and this person actually, during this time, this is when I first got to the medium security from the low security. I spent 6 months at the low, then I was at the medium for 2 years. At this particular time, there's an interesting group of people that sat out in front of the cell, kind of like a front porch. Ghost. Man, he went on a 2-month rampage. I mean, the dozen dudes. Those dudes got by Ghost. He ain't normal for that entire time, though. For like 6 months before then, I mean. And everybody thought he was normal. So this is during that time. And there's another guy who's this silly, a Native American fella. Turned out like this whole bunch of people was on the registry, but like they talk crap about chomos and stuff and it's funny how that works out. And I don't know that any one of them knew about the other one because the way they talked, it didn't seem likely. And Ghost particularly, he wasn't in there that time for it, but since that I couldn't help but look him up, his background, and yeah, he did have that type of charge, but the one he was in for that time wasn't. So, the particular drugs, like I said, this fella Max, he was known to sell these to a number of people. And at this particular time, there's another story about this as well. I believe he might have been head, it might have been king, I'm not quite sure, but one of them was the head of the Aryan Brotherhood. There weren't a whole lot of them, but he had the tattoos and everything else, and he just was... He talked a lot about that stuff, and a lot of people that talk so much about it, turns out there's something crazy about it. Now, just clear up the story about Max. He got kicked out. He had to get like a 3x3 of tattoos covered up in a week because all the guys that were in there in Brotherhood were short on time, and they're like, listen, if this was a different spot, we go ahead and handle it. There's so many chomos here, let it slide. But he was doing this thing, as did many others. When you go to pill line, you stand in a line. Now, at the low security, it's not a long line. If the slow guy's working, you're waiting for 30 minutes till you get your meds. If the quick guy's working, 5 to 10 minutes. The quick guy knew everybody. He knew everybody. He'd see you. He'd have your medicine out. You wouldn't have to show him an ID or nothing. Then there was somebody who was about intermediate speed. Then there was the slow guy. Okay? The slow guy you'd have to hand him your ID. He'd look at your ID. Look at you, and crush the medications. Some people didn't crush them. The slowest guy crushed the medications. Now, even though they crush the medications, sometimes they check people should they be suspicious. But believe it or not, people are spitting that water mix with the pills into an empty pill bottle, and they'd take it and they'd dry it out, and then they'd sell it. There was a unique thing that Max did that I had a contribution to. There wasn't a whole lot of people to hang out with in this place. Okay, at the medium security, I mostly hung out with the amigos. My celly's number 2 for the Pisces, but at that time, my ex, who turned out to be an awful hussy, was black. So, I'm not going to do hanging out with people with Swazis and stuff tattooed on them. If they see me in the visiting room, we're not going to end up being best friends. They're going to have something to say to me. Ironically, though, the other guys at every Brotherhood, a lot of them didn't have nothing to say about it. It was a lot of the, flunky people that were trying to be too hard for the yard. The actual people that were about it, they never had nothing to say. But anyhow, he was doing this thing where he dried it out, as did many others. Now, a lot of times what people do is they take the mat, double it over on the top bunk, put the liquid out, thin it out, let it air dry, scrape it up. Okay? Now, seeing as how I started driving and for a dealer and smuggling, I had a number of different ways that I smuggle. And when I had my own thing going on, I was driving and picking it up. There were different ways I would do certain things to not get caught. I had a lot of really creative hiding spots that kept me from getting in trouble. And, like I said, I'm not advocating it, but looking back on it, it was pretty creative, some of the stuff that ultimately did. And one of the processes was, okay, he's drying it out. That's the same thing as something I used to do. So basically, they have a 180 water heater. It's like 180 degrees, just short of boiling. So you get your cup, go over there, press the thing, gets the water in there. It's dang short of boiling hot. Now, you put a piece of plastic over top of that cup with the rubber band around it. That's what I showed him. And you put that liquid that's in the pill bottle, you spit into there, on top of that plastic. The steam dries it out quicker, speeds it up about 5 times quicker. So he got to where he was drying a lot quicker, which, it helped business out a little bit, move a little bit quicker for him. And, so at this place, it was a unique place. Like I said, Petersburg, a lot of the people there were locals. Should have been a red flag since Max was all the way from out in Arkansas. Okay, he was in there for counterfeiting. That's the truth. And that's what his paper said. But he did have a charge of when he was messing with somebody that's underage. Now, he also was young, 18, 19, and the girl was underage as a statutory charge. He ended up marrying the girl. So think of that what you may. It doesn't matter what you think about it. If somebody in federal prison, it's pretty much black and white. There are no blurred lines, and stuff a lot of the time in these types of situations. Sex offender or not a sex offender. Pimps are not a cool thing. I had a handful of pimps that got sent to Petersburg from California. They sent them there because they have something called the SOMP program, Sex Offender Management Program. But ultimately, it ends up being a place that people get sent, and there's some gang dropouts too. So even though it's not like a protection yard, it gets sent there from the other coast. So half the people are local. Like I said, I self-surrendered to Petersburg Low. It's the first prison that I ever went to. It's the only prison I ever went to was the Petersburg SDI, the complex, low, camp, and medium. Never went anywhere else. It is a large number of people that are locals first spot. Okay, so we had a number of weirdos in this place, and ultimately that's what got Max looked at quite a bit. There was this chomo that went by Yogi that, terrible person. Bald head with a little rat tail coming out of the middle of his bald head with all these Buddhist-like tattoos. He walk around chanting Hare Krishna. But that was how he got in with, his victims was he'd go to a church, find a mom that had a kid that, he liked to look, it's messed up stuff. And he done it 3 times. The third time he's in there for that. But anyway, he had Yogi and Nubby, the inbred man that was born without fingers. He had nubs. Rumor was they got cut off, but turns out his dad was his granddad and his mom was his sister. So, he popped out a little messed up. But he had them on the walkway selling wraps for him. Wraps are a big money maker because you can buy wraps off the commissary. You can buy a giant bag of cheese. It's cheaper in there than it is in a grocery store. A bag of cheese is big for $10. And then The meats, you buy, a pan of meats for $15, which is 3 bread bags worth, and they make wraps and sell them for $1 a piece. If you fry them, sometimes they can sell them for 2. A lot of times they sell them for 1. It just sells quicker. But that's what got him looked at. But anyhow, a lot of people in this prison, because there were so many chomos, like probably 40%, associate with them on some level. Some people become friends with them, like good best friends with them, and everything else. Just say, well, just ignore it, just look over to whatever. I don't know. And he did business with a number of them. Now, a number of them, got into this type of thing. Now, there was this little odd, middle-aged man, closer to, senior citizen, I'd say. He had white hair, that bought this stuff from Max. He bought these pills from, and Max would give people on credit, but now he was trying to do that, look as tough as he could. Now, he ended up getting sent to Petersburg from Leavenworth. Leavenworth has a history to it, okay? Yeah, they got a military prison out there, but this is the federal prison. It's supposed to have changed a little bit up since back then. It's like a medium now, but him and actually the other native dude, they both sound like they got smashed and then they got sent out there. So he's giving this guy this stuff, and I didn't hang out with them exclusive, but I went and stopped by and hung out with them for probably an hour a day. Like I said, I just got there, and nobody knows what. This stuff hadn't come to light about each of them. Each of them was claiming like they was something, and then it came out they were something completely different. Now, I'm not all with, the whole die-hard prison, street politics, and all that stuff, but I've got morals, okay? I've always had morals to a certain degree, and somebody that messes with kids, that's something, somebody that hurts women or kids, that's somebody, I don't have any respect for that, and a lot of the time those people aren't changing. Just about always, they're not changing. You can say what you want about, have whatever type of theory, and of course there are some people that might say something different, but that's how I feel about that. So anyway, this middle-aged man would always come over to him, and he'd make fun of him right in front of him and everything with the other guys that were out front. And I didn't ever sit out, like pull up a chair with them like they had the chairs pulled up in front of the cell, but I'd go hang out, stand over there, and just talk to them for a little bit. Like I said, there wasn't a whole lot of people to talk with. I ended up being friends with this guy, Satan, is what they called him. He's an Aryan Brotherhood dude. And like I said, he ain't nothing crazy to say about me or anything. He ended up becoming a friend. Got some wild stuff with him, too. Lord have mercy. I'm telling you, some of these people, the stuff that happened after prison, too. Oh, my Lord. I don't even know, like, how I'd tell it on here. Like, if it's appropriateness and everything else. Yeah, I got that wild for him after prison. But anyway, in there, I witnessed a lot of this, heard a lot of this stuff, and you hear when people have, certain issues with certain people owing them money, you hear about it. You hear them complaining about it. So this old man keeps getting more and more stuff on credit, and he lets him run up a debt. And, you hear him pressing up on this guy, going in the cell, and, it's a number of times, and he keeps talking about it. And of course, the two other guys he's hanging out with, Ghost and the other dude, are playing it up, saying, yeah, little punk's playing you, he's going to do whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it's riling him up. Now, despite, having done prison time before and everything else, and he should have more sense than to know to let people get him riled up, thinking of something more, he's getting an issue with this. Like, he's getting real, it feels like his image or reputation, is getting looked at. So he goes in there, and he smacks this guy up, all right? Now, the guy checks in. What checking in means is it means you go and you tell him, listen, I fear for my safety, blah, 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 this, and that. And then they put you in solitary confinement. Now, at a lot of prisons, this is something that's unique about Petersburg, and I'm going to let you know about this. Like I said, half the people are locals, but then half the people are messed up. Chomos, yeah. So, he checks into the hull. And he's saying, I'm not going back out there, going to send you somewhere else. Send me somewhere else. And a lot of times, at other prisons, they'd send somebody somewhere else. They'd have to sit there for a minute. But Petersburg, okay, there was a few things. They had to look like they have it under control because they got such a high population of chomos. I saw brutal violence that I cannot even begin to tell you. And at any other prison, gang violence, anything else of this sort would constitute for a lockdown, anywhere between 2 weeks to a few months. I've heard from a lot of my friends, a ton of friends that were in USPs when I was in there, and they told me, yeah, you'd be locked down half the year. They think something's going down, they lock it down till they can cool it off, figure it out, and then they let everybody back out. Petersburg never got locked down, even after unspeakable violence where people were airlifted off the soccer field at the rec yard. They'd open it right back up because they have to appear to have it under control, or else they have to report it to regional. So this guy's sitting in the hole. This guy's sitting in there and telling them, I'm not coming back out. And they're like, dude, you came here from the West Coast. This is Petersburg. This is your final stop. You don't have anywhere else you can go. You're going back out. And he ends up, speaking on Max. Now, seeing as how, Max has some stuff with him, and it sounds like he also got sent to Petersburg because he had issues out in Arkansas. They're not going to send him. They're like, basically, this is two people that's on the registry. They're having issues. They're just going to have to figure this out. We're not spending all the money all the time. So they just let that guy sit in the hole, and they end up calling Max and talking to him, and he talks about how the dude told on him and everything else. And yeah, that was that. After, a few weeks or so of this guy being in the hole, they let him back out. He ends up back in our unit again. Of course, that's where they're going to send him. And our unit was the most messed up. Of any of the 12 units at Petersburg Medium, there was no unit like this. And it all comes down to this awful middle-aged woman who was a counselor, who I have multiple people who are out now who can agree with this. I'm not going to mention by name, So I'm just leaving it generic as that. So then, nobody can come after me, on that. But everybody knows and everybody can attest to this. And there's nobody, not one inmate that I know of in the history of it, that can speak up for her because she was that awful. But she used to show most people like that as her little eyes and ears. Nubby, duck sauce. Yeah, the rejects of the round table, basically, or her eyes and ears. And, she'd have them back there because, see, it's a V-shaped complex. There's a unit on the ground floor on each side, and there's this middle thing that connects it. There's 2 units on top of those, but to enter those, there's an exterior set of stairs. Now, they're linked by this middle part. Now, that middle part you can't see in. There's like a window on it, and it's a hallway. The counselor's office back to the side. It's way tucked in the back, so you can't see what's going on back there. So the people that were always some of the biggest freak show people got the jobs cleaning up back there because that's where they could talk and nobody'd hear it. That's how it went. So this guy comes back, and Max goes up and presses him again. Sounds like he smacks him a little bit. Not anything enough to leave marks to where he can be like, look what happened to me, but enough to press him. So this guy, he pressing him and he's trying to come up with something. You're going to pay me this, and that. And the guy's like scared of his mind. Like you can see the guy's terrified. And like I said, he messed with kids, so no sympathy for him. You got certain stuff coming when you do certain stuff like that. But Max keeps on going back and he keeps on letting him know, listen, you're going to have to come up with something. And so this guy's trying to, come up with what he can to give to him and everything else. But ultimately, this guy ends up checking back in again, which is something that happened you see a number of times. Now, he ends up checking back in again. Max gets called down there. He gets threatened and everything else. And they release this guy out, but they release him to another unit. You didn't see that too often. A lot of times you go back to the same unit you were in. You don't switch units unless you're switching to, there's a religious program, which is a unit. And, people get sent to Petersburg for that. So if you take the religious program, which typically gives you 9 months halfway house, and 9 months halfway house doesn't mean you do your prison time and then you get another 9 months in a halfway house to figure life out. It means you are released 9 months early from prison, which counts to your prison sentence. The drug program takes a year off your sentence and gives you 6 months halfway house typically. So people get sent to Petersburg from that. So there are people from serious mediums that get sent to Petersburg to do the drug program. Because like I said, it's not classified as like a protection. That's not what it is. So you'd have this wild mix, of people that were about it, and then a lot of people that were just weird. Seriously. You look at them, you wouldn't let your kids get in a pool with them, much less much less be alone with them. I mean, like, some of these people look like, just like with some of their features, look like they might have something you might catch if you're in the same water as them. I mean, seriously, they're some odd looking people. But anyway, ends up in another unit. And Max still got to get his money from him. So, but here's the problem: he can't catch this guy. Okay, now our building usually ate in the first three. It was one of the first three buildings to be released to go eat. It's based on which building's cleanest during a 2-week rotation. That's the order they release you out. So the cleanest building eats first, the dirtiest building eats last. Okay, and they only open the compound 10 minutes every hour during the day, but in the evening at dinner time, once your building's released, people just walk the walkway, and people sell wraps, pizzas, everything else out on the walkway. So he's out there early, and this guy, is avoiding him, missing meals sometimes, everything else, like trying to avoid him. But he's still going to get his money because, he's worried, word's going to get back. People are going to start to get trying him. So he contracts something out. There's just going to say there's a separate gang basically that he ends up agreeing to make an agreement with, splitting the money with them, but they got to get the money out of this guy. And so he ends up doing that with these people. And it's kind of funny too, because Aryan Brotherhood, like, a lot of the stuff he did, went against the supposed values of the Aryan Brotherhood. Okay, having Chomo sell his wraps, doing this, doing that. He got another gang of another race to help him out with this, so he's working together. And so it's a lot of the stuff he did with that, is kind of against typical prison politics, that type of thing. This wasn't a typical place, but also, it's kind of what got people to look into him a little more in the end. So it sounds like, the people in there, they ended up getting some type of thing. They paid off his debt to Max, part of his debt. Sounds like he might have got half his money back. He's going to say he got more than that. But, knowing these people and knowing everything else of the people he was messing with, I wouldn't say he got more than half of it back. And basically, there are certain times in prison where people will buy a debt, okay? They will buy a debt from somebody. And when people buy a debt, they're going to just torture that person with making them make payments back. And you heard the stories about it. Basically, this guy got smacked up a whole bunch because of it. And eventually, once he got issues with this gang, he finally did get transferred to somewhere else. There are other prisons besides Petersburg. There's a handful of them, but Petersburg definitely, I would imagine, is the freakiest, craziest, wildest, weirdest prison on the planet. Like, you don't understand. You don't understand. If you just saw 100 of these people that walk by, just select a random 100 that are on the walkway, and look at about a quarter of them, and just look at them, you're like, man, it's some wild looking people. They don't look right, okay? Yeah. But anyhow, where it was involved with this gang, and the guy ends up checking in again, he ends up getting sent somewhere else. And you hear the rumors, you hear the stuff, and ultimately a couple of those gang members, it sound like they end up going to the hole too, and they got sent somewhere else. So I'm guessing the little Chomo guy got sent to another place. There's a place called like Seegerville or something like that, and other places like that. And it sounded like the two gang members, the ones that were going in there and, smacking him up, it sounded like they're doing serious damage, like enough to leave marks, probably, smack, little, shaking him and stuff. But they end up getting sent somewhere else, which was a common thing that you get at Petersburg. So, see, people mess with these, and what did you expect? What did you expect to happen? So, it ended up being this thing where they thought they was going to have like a never-ending bunch of money because this guy can't get sent somewhere else. But now, where they're messing with people that aren't messed up. See, Max had charges, and it was in his record and all that stuff. These guys didn't have that. These guys were actual active and about it and everything else. So it actually does appear to pose a threat. Basically, they looked at Max, and they looked at this little guy like, this guy's after me. He's Aryan Brotherhood and all this, and they're like looking at the papers, and they're probably like, shoot, he's a Chomo just like you. What are you talking about? But then when he had a problem with this other gang, they're like, well, shoot, this is a problem. Something could happen here. not only is it a problem, but you got these gang members pressing up on the chomos, and they catered to the chomos. I mean, they really did. It's backwards place. I mean, if you were anything but a chomo, you got treated like a second class citizen. It's backwards. It's messed up. I cannot tell you. It would disgust you if you could actually see it. But anyhow, they all get sent off because of that, you know. And Max kept doing his thing, and you know, he had this one image of like this too hard for the yard tough guy type deal that he had going on, until what happened when somebody had him everything but him looked up and everything else, because, you know, like I said, he was associated with chomos, having them sell his wraps, he was selling them, you know, his pills and everything else. Then it was something else. He became something else. That too hard for the yards stuff all dropped, and he just became, you know, I want to say he acted more normal, like a normal person. I guess it humbled him some, but, you know, he didn't have his same friend group and everything else. But, you know, during that time, there was a number of people that he did this to. And it wasn't just with the meds. It was also with those pictures that the people trade like trading cards, but he'd had them going to the weirdos too. So, you know, that's another story with a bunch of that. But this middle-aged, you know, older white man, you know, wasn't a big guy. People go beyond their means when it comes to addictions, whatever it is. They're not thinking, well, I don't have a way to pay this back. So instead of thinking logically and using what they have the money to use, and they get fronted stuff from people that are willing to front them stuff, and they get into a debt they can't get out of, which is something that happened over and over again. You saw this happen over and over again. You know, and it is what it is. But anyway, if you liked the video, press the like button. If not, ask 26 minutes and 36 seconds of your life in which you'll never get back. I hope you did, though.